Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Mr. Pad Paramahamsa, Padavadikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhakti-Vedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai, ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Jaya Vishnupad Paramahamsa, Padavadikacharya Ashtotar to the Sri Srimad, His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavini Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakta-vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. I think we can close that door now. That's all. Yeah, leave that one open. Really? It's not the first verse of the chapter?
It was the book was opened to 661, not 611, and I somehow wrote that.
Oh, I was wondering about that. Actually, you have time to write it because we're going to read the whole long intro. before we do the verse. Huh? Oh, that's right. It'll take you like half an hour. All right. Narayanam namaskritya Narang chaiva narottamam Devim saraswatim vyasam Tato jayamudiriyet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, we should offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta prajeshta badreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatyuttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering devotional service to the pure devotee, all that is inauspicious within the heart is destroyed almost to nil. And loving devotion to the Supreme Lord, who is glorified in transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, on this 12th day of September 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are beginning Canto 6 of Srimad Bhagavatam. And I'm sorry, it doesn't say what the title of it is. Does anyone know? I forget. Poshana, maintenance, I believe. No, the whole canto title. Yeah, Poshana. Well, prescribed duties for mankind. You're right. Okay. And the first chapter is entitled The History of the Life of Ajamila, and we'll read the chapter summary. Throughout Srimad Bhagavatam, there are descriptions of 10 subject matters, including creation, subsequent creation, and the planetary systems. Shukadeva Goswami, the speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam, has already described creation, subsequent creation, and planetary systems in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th cantos. Now in this 6th canto, which consists of 19 chapters, he will describe Poshana, or protection by the Lord. The first chapter relates the history of Ajamila, who was considered a greatly sinful man, but was liberated when 4 order carriers of Vishnu came to rescue him from the hands of the order carriers of Yamaraj. A full description of how he was liberated, having been relieved of the reactions of his sinful life, is given in this chapter. Sinful activities are painful both in this life and in the next. We should know for certain that the cause of all painful life is sinful action. On the path of fruitive work, one certainly commits sinful activities, and therefore, according to the considerations of karma-kāṇḍa, different types of atonement are recommended. Such methods of atonement, however, do not free one from ignorance, which is the root of sinful life. Consequently, one is prone to commit sinful activities even after atonement, which is therefore very inadequate for purification. On the path of speculative knowledge, one becomes free from sinful life by understanding things as they are. Therefore, the acquirement of speculative knowledge is also considered a method of atonement. While performing fruitive activities, one can become free from the actions of sinful life through austerity, penance, celibacy, control of the mind and senses, truthfulness, and the practice of mystic yoga. By awakening knowledge, one may also neutralize sinful reactions. None of these methods, however, can free one from the tendency to commit sinful activities. By bhakti-yoga, one can completely avoid the tendency for sinful life. Other methods are not very feasible. Therefore, the Vedic literature concludes that devotional service is more important than the methods of karma-kāṇḍa and jñāna-kāṇḍa. Only the path of devotional service is auspicious for everyone. Fruitive activities and speculative knowledge cannot independently liberate anyone, but devotional service, independent of karma and jnana, is so potent that one who has fixed his mind at the lotus feet of Krishna is guaranteed not to meet the Yamadutas, the order carriers of Yamaraj, even in dreams. To prove the strength of devotional service, Shukadeva Goswami described the history of Ajamila. Ajamila was a resident of Kanyakubja, the modern Kanauj. He was trained by his parents to become a perfect Brahmin by studying the Vedas and following the regulative principles. But because of his past, this youthful Brahmin was somehow attracted by a prostitute, and because of her association, he became most fallen and abandoned all regulative principles. Ajamila begot in the womb of the prostitute 10 sons, the last of whom was called Narayan. At the time of Ajamila's death, when the order carriers of Yamaraj came to take him, he loudly called the name Narayan in fear because he was attached to his youngest son. Thus he remembered the original Narayan, Lord Vishnu. Although he did not chant the holy name of Narayan completely offenselessly, it acted nevertheless. As soon as he chanted the holy name of Narayan, the order carriers of Lord Vishnu immediately appeared on the scene. A discussion ensued between the order carriers of Lord Vishnu and those of Yamaraj, and by hearing that discussion, Ajamila was liberated. He could then understand the bad effect of fruitive activities and could also understand how exalted is the process of devotional service. Okay. So, did anyone activate their... Okay, you have enough, many chanters. All right. So I already did Om Namo, didn't I? Beginning. Okay. All right. We'll do word by words. Shri Parikshita Vacha Nivritti Marga Katita Adau Bhagavata Yatha Krama Yogopalabdhena Brahmana Yad Asangsritihi Shri Parikshita Nivritti Marga Katita Adau Bhagavata Yatha Krama Yogopalabdhena Brahmana Yadasangsritihi Shri Parikshita Vacha Nivritti Marga Katita Adau Bhagavata Yatha Krama Yogopalabdhena Brahmana Yadasangsritihi Shri Parikshita Vacha Nivritti Marga Katita Adau Bhagavata Yatha Krama Yogopalabdhena Brahmana Yadasangsritihi Shri Parikshita Vacha Nivritti Marga Katita Adau Bhagavata Yatha Krama Yogopalabdhena Brahmana Yadasangsritihi Shri Parikshita Vacha Nivritti Marga Katita Adau Bhagavata Yatha Krama Yogopalabdhena Brahmana Yadasangsritihi Shri Parikshita Vacha Nivritti Marga Katita Adau Bhagavata Yatha Krama Yogopalabdhena Brahmana Yadasangsritihi Shri Parikshita Vacha Nivritti Marga Katita Adau Bhagavata Yatha Krama Yogopalabdhena Brahmana Yadasangsritihi. Anyone on Zoom? Okay. Shri Parikshitavacha. Maharaj Parikshit said, Nivritti Margaha, the path of liberation. Katitaha, described. Ada, in the beginning. Bhagavata, by your holiness. Yata, duly. Krama, gradually. Yoga upalabdhena, obtained by the yoga process. Brahmana, along with Lord Brahma, after reaching Brahmaloka. Yat, by which, asangsritihi, cessation of the repetition of birth and death. Can we close that door almost the way you had it before? The problem is someone goes through it and they leave it open. Okay. That's good. Thank you. Translation. Maharaj Parikshit said, O my Lord, O Shukadeva Goswami, you have already described in the second canto the path of liberation, Nivritti Marga. By following that path, one is certainly elevated gradually to the highest planetary system, Brahmaloka, from which one is promoted to the spiritual world along with Lord Brahma. Thus one's repetition of birth and death in the material world ceases. Purport. Since Maharaj Parikshit was a Vaishnava, when he heard the description at the end of the fifth canto of the different hellish conditions of life, he was very much concerned with how to liberate the conditioned souls from the clutches of Maya and take them back home, back to Godhead. Therefore, he reminded his spiritual master, Shukadeva Goswami, about the Nivritti Marga, or path of liberation, which he, Shukadeva Goswami, had described in the second canto. Maharaj Parikshit, who at the time of death was fortunate to have met Shukadeva Goswami, inquired from Shukadeva Goswami about the path of liberation at that crucial time. Shukadeva Goswami very much appreciated his question and congratulated him by saying, Bhadiyanishate prashna krato loka hitang nipa atmavit sammatak pungsam shotim yadishu yakparaha. My dear king, your question is glorious because it is very beneficial for all kinds of people. The answer to this question is the prime subject matter for hearing, and it is approved by all transcendentalists. Srimad Bhagavatam 2.1.1. Okay, for extra credit. Who knows what that question was? Anyone remember from the end of the first canto? Yeah, what should one hear? What should one think of at the time of death? Parikshit Maharaj was astonished that the living entities in the conditional stage do not accept the path of liberation, devotional service, instead of suffering in so many hellish conditions. This is the symptom of a Vaishnava. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhu behevacha. A Vaishnava is an ocean of mercy. Pada dukkha dukhi. He is unhappy because of the unhappiness of others. Therefore, Parikshit Maharaj, being compassionate toward the conditioned souls suffering in hellish life, suggested that Shukadeva Goswami continue describing the path of liberation, which he had explained in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam. The word asangsriti is very important in this connection. Sangsriti refers to continuing on the path of birth and death. Asangsriti, on the contrary, refers to nivritti marga, or the path of liberation, by which one's birth and death cease and one gradually progresses to Brahmaloka, unless one is a pure devotee who does not care about going to the higher planetary systems, in which case one immediately returns home back to Godhead by executing devotional service. Chaktva deham punarjanmanaiti. Parikshit Maharaj, therefore, was very eager to hear from Shukadeva Goswami about the path of liberation for the conditioned soul. According to the opinion of the Acharyas, the word karma-yoga indicates that by first performing karma-yoga, and then jnana-yoga, and finally coming to the platform of bhakti-yoga, one can be liberated. Bhakti-yoga, however, is so powerful that it does not depend on karma-yoga or jnana-yoga. Bhakti-yoga itself is so powerful that even an impious man with no assets in karma-yoga or an illiterate with no assets in jnana-yoga can undoubtedly be elevated to the spiritual world if he simply adheres to bhakti-yoga. Mame vaishyasya sangshayaha. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 8:7 that by the process of bhakti-yoga, one undoubtedly goes back to Godhead, back to home to the spiritual world. Yogis, however, instead of going directly to the spiritual world, sometimes want to see other planetary systems, and therefore they ascend to the planetary system where Lord Brahma lives, as indicated here by the word Brahmana. At the time of dissolution, Lord Brahma, along with all the inhabitants of Brahmaloka, goes directly to the spiritual world. This is confirmed in the Vedas as follows. Brahmana sahate sarve samprapte patisanchare padasyante kritatmana babhishanti padam padam. Because of their exalted position, those who are on Brahmaloka at the time of dissolution go directly back home, back to Godhead, along with Lord Brahma. Om jnana timurandasya jnanandana shalakaya chakshu unmidatam mena tasmai shri gurave namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and all members of Sri Parampara. So before we expound too much on this verse, some of you may have noticed a little contradiction here. And this was noted by, some years ago, by Mukunda Maharaj when he was reading text 16 of chapter 8, which is after the verse that Prabhupada cites. No, but he cited the text in this 8th chapter, near the beginning, after Krishna says, Antakali chamame vasmudan mukva kalevaram yapyati samudbhavam yasti natrata sankshya. If one remembers me at the time of death, and whoever at the end of life quits his body remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this there is no doubt. And then Prabhupada refers to 8.7, but he doesn't quote it in the purport. Did you notice that? Which says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmada yudyacha mayarpita mano buddhi mame vaishyasya sankshya. Therefore, Arjuna, you should always think of me in the form of Krishna, and at the same time carry out your prescribed duty of fighting. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind, intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. So this doesn't say anything about having to go to Brahma Loka or practice jnana yoga, karma yoga. This is Krishna saying this: if you cultivate Krishna consciousness, you come to me. And then Prabhupada cites this next verse. No, that's the verse he cited, 8.7. And then a few verses later, we find a description of Brahmaloka, which says, Brahma bhuvana loka punarabharti nojana mamai upecha dekonteya punar janma navidyate. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all the places of misery wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains to my abode, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. So, but then in this purport here, the way it had before we did some research, it said that everyone on Brahmaloka, all of Brahma's devotees, they all go back to Godhead. Now, more or less what we just read in the Bhagavatam, that anyone who makes it to Brahmaloka, it's just a stop. You may have to stay there for 311 trillion, 40 billion years, because that's the lifetime of Brahma. But after that, everyone goes back with Brahma. But what about Brahma bhuvana loka? In other words, here Krishna is saying it's a place of return. So there seems to be a contradiction there. So we did some research, and we found this. Those who progress in Krishna consciousness on the higher planets are gradually elevated to the higher and higher planets, and at the time of, so this is after, by going to the higher planets, you still have to progress more in Krishna consciousness, because somehow you had a desire to go to the heavenly planets. But if you progress enough on this planet, and you have no desire to go to the heavenly planets, you're pure devotee, you go directly back to Godhead, right? You can go directly back. But here, he's talking about going to higher planets. So Prabhupada writes here, as persons on earth are elevated to higher planets, people on higher planets such as Brahmaloka, Chandraloka, and Indraloka fall down to earth. The practice of sacrifice, called Panchagni Vidya, recommended in the Chandogya Upanishad, enables one to reach Brahmaloka. But if on Brahmaloka one does not cultivate Krishna consciousness, then he must return to earth. So that's in tune with this verse of the Bhagavad Gita. Those who progress in Krishna consciousness on the higher planets are gradually elevated to higher planets, and at the time of universal devastation are transferred to the eternal spiritual kingdom. Baladev Vijayabhushan, in his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, quotes this verse from the Kurma Purana. Brahmana sahate sarve samprapte patisanchare padasyante kutatmana pavashanti padam padam. When there is devastation of this material universe, Brahma and the devotees who are constantly engaged in Krishna consciousness are all transferred to the spiritual universe and to specific spiritual planets according to their desires. But not everybody on Brahmaloka is on that platform. And so those have to merge into the body of Mahavishnu and come back. So the point is that yes, Brahmaloka is a very exalted place, and and especially Brahma, this Brahma, because there's many Brahmalokas. So our Brahma is the head of our sampradaya, and Krishna down to Brahma. This is called the Brahma Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. So if you get up to Brahmaloka and you are following Brahma and you're advancing in Krishna consciousness, then you're a pure devotee, you'll go back. But there's some who don't. They wanted to go to Brahmaloka for some other reason. And so they have to come back. They eventually come back into. So that's the idea. Okay. And now, so that's the idea. And Om Jnana Timarandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chukshu Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and all members of Shri Parampara. So, in the introduction there, we learned pretty much what's going to happen in this first chapter. And as Maharaj was explaining yesterday, this is the impetus for the whole chapter is Maharaj Parikshit's feeling of care, of paradukha dukhi. He's feeling the empathy toward those who are suffering so grievously in the hells that we heard in the last chapter. And that will open the door for Shukadeva Goswami to explain the pastime of Ajamila. And what the whole point of Ajamila pastime is that even though he had fallen from his Brahminical standards and became a real rogue and rascal his whole life, because he had the presence of mind, maybe from his early days, to name his final son, maybe his other sons were too, but at least the last son was named Narayan. Then when the time came and he was so frightened and terrified by this appearance of the Yamadutas, he called out spontaneously to his son, Narayan. There's a little pastime here, in editing pastime, if you will. When you listen to a tape of this, there's a tape Prabhupada gives a lecture on this chapter, on this verse, I think first verse. No, it's the verse within the chapter where he calls out the name Narayan. He's reading from the transcript. He's not reading from manuscript. He's not actually reading from the book. It hasn't been published yet. The 5th canto would come out with all the hells, and so Prabhupada wanted to. He read from that canto many times, especially Rishabdev's teachings, first chapter and 5th chapter. But now he started to read the 6th canto, but it hadn't been printed yet. So the devotee who's reading it, reciting the verse and then reading the purport, he's reading it, but it says Narayan, Narayan, Narayan 3 times. And Prabhupada says, 3 times? Once is sufficient. What does it say? It says 3 times. It says once is sufficient. So it's been changed. It never made it into print. It did change 1 time, Narayan. So anyway, the whole idea is that we don't have the facility, nor is it necessary, to practice all of these other processes of atonement. There's all kinds of sacrifices mentioned in the karma-kāṇḍa section, by which you can neutralize the sinful reactions that you had to suffer for that. So you're neutralizing them. But you're not neutralizing, you're not curing yourself of the tendency to commit sin. Now Prabhupada says the root of the sin is ignorance. The root of suffering is sin. But the root of committing sin is ignorance. So how does that work? Well, we have certain pushings. Vacho vegam, manasa krodha vegam, jiva vegam. These are built in to having a human body. They're urges. The urges to speak, the urges of the mind, the urges of tongue, belly, and genitals. And they're always impetus coming from outside in order firing up these urges. In other words, that's what the material world is. So I may have atoned, I neutralized so many sins. But if I don't have the knowledge by which I can learn how to control these urges, then I'm just going to be victimized again by my senses, mind, intelligence, because it's built in to having a material body. So knowledge is critical. But from knowledge, real knowledge means you get a process by which you can transcend even the urges. In other words, the urges aren't even there anymore. That comes up in the Bhagavad Gita. Vishayavani vartante nidahadasa dehinam. Rasa varjam rasopyasya param jishvana varjate. In this verse, the word rasa means a taste for sense gratification. So vishaya vinivartante nidahadasa. If you don't consume them, aha means to consume, right? So each of our senses consumes another object of the sense, right? You're hearing, you may be lying, you're not seeing anything, you're lying on your couch and you listen to some favorite rock music, something, or song. So the ear is consuming that, the mind is consuming that. So that's the general tendency for sense gratification. So he says, niraharasa dehina. The living entity can refrain. Vishaya vinivartante. The vishayas are the objects of the senses. If you don't consume them, then you can do that for some time. But the seed of the desire is still there. And rasa, this is rasa varjam. But if you perceive the param, here means it's short for Krishna, for the transcendence, then even the rasa goes. Rasa varjam rasopyasya param drishrana vartate. And then you don't return. This is the famous getting the higher taste. That's the whole idea. Is that we can't be tapasvis, I often say, okay, what would it be like to try to follow the four regular principles? No holy name, no prasadam, no association, no deities. Just that, oh, it's bad, I'm going to suffer. That's not enough. It's not enough. That's why no one goes to church anymore. The church is going out because their whole process is confessing, and I committed this sin and I confess. But then you go back out and commit the sin again because you're not really getting any transcendence. There's a wonderful article by Rabindranath Sarup. Some of this BTG, there's some wonderful preaching in there. Maybe we should integrate a little bit. I remember this article. He was in Philadelphia. He was the president there. And he was very, very open to giving lectures in university and things like that, So he was invited to give a talk at a seminary there in Philadelphia. Seminary is where the Catholic priests get trained up, So these young men, just like here, a lot of the young guys, So he gave the talk, and they were fascinated by it, And then he had some informal talks with them. Out of the church or wherever, out of the hall, he was just sort of visiting with them. And they were kind of kicking back and, it says, well, what do you fellas do when you're not, studying the Bible and doing some service or whatever? Well, we got TV and sometimes we smoke a little bit, we can drink a little wine, He was shocked. And he said, oh man, if we only had a chance to have a girlfriend, And he was at that point, he said he became angry because these were fellows who could have joined the temple. In other words, they're serious about spiritual life, but they were, going in the way that they've been taught, and trained into Catholicism. But they weren't being given the means to actually transcend these natural urges that are pushing you towards sinful life. And so, and then he realized this is the great treasure of Krishna consciousness. That if you practice it properly and you get up early and you chant and you're serious about your rounds and your kirtan, so essential, you can actually become more austere, than these guys. And you can eventually lose the taste for these lower things. Even in your youth, you can become fixed. And it's all about getting the taste. So in these other religions, that taste of love of God, the rasa, which even in a neophyte stage, you can get a little bit of it. You can get enough of it to encourage you, and if we're strict and we study, the knowledge is so important. There's the vairagya and vidya go together, right? Vairagya vidya nija bhakti-yoga shikshakta meka purusha purana. Who can complete the verse? Sri Krishna Chaitanya Shadidadari Kripam Buddhaya Stamaham Bhaja. Okay, I haven't chanted in a while. He had it. So this is a verse written by Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Now it's interesting. He was a super advanced Mayavadi, right? But he also had a good heart, And when he saw Lord Chaitanya fall down in the temple of Jagannath, it's a wonderful pastime in, I think, 6th chapter of Madhya Lila. And Lord Chaitanya has just taken sannyas. He's just taken sannyas, and he's gone to Puri, where his mother said, please set up there. So he's following his mother's advice. And he's with Nityananda's with him, and Gadadhar's with him, Mukunda, there's a couple others. But when Nityananda, he broke, he had a staff. He had a danda he was carrying. These days you don't see the sannyasis so much with the dandas. But you're supposed to carry that for some time anyway. So Lord Chaitanya, he just took sannyas. So he had his dandas. So he took a bath in, what was it, Narmada River, some river. And Nityananda broke his staff and threw it in the river. So what does he need a staff for? He's not more than a Paramahamsa, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when Lord Nityananda came out, he said, where's my staff? So I forget, what did he give him some story about it? He said, I broke it. He told him a lie. I fell on it and it broke and I threw it in the river. So the Lord Chaitanya took that. I mean, it was they all knew, what was going. That, you weren't able to keep my staff. I'm not going to go with you anymore. You go ahead or I'll go ahead to the temple, Puri. So, you go ahead, Lord. So he went, he went ahead of them and they followed. But he's Lord Chaitanya, so he arrived there quite a bit earlier than they did. Walks into the temple, immediately sees Jagannath, goes into ecstasy, falls down. Oh, this is my Lord, and falls down into samadhi. So it means he's still. It looks like he might be dead, But the guards in the temple, they thought, because they always see people coming in and faking it, and they have to kick him out, So they were about to beat him, but Sarvabhauma said, no, wait a minute. It looks like this could be the real thing. And he wasn't moving. He was very concerned. He took a little cotton, put it by Lord Chaitanya's ear, and there was a little movement there. Oh, okay, so he must be in high samadhi. So he had him taken to his home. He was so attractive. His beauty and everything, very young, So he had a good heart. So that fatherly care, was opened up the channel, So anyway, the result was that Lord Chaitanya was preaching to him. He said, oh, you're so young. How are you going to maintain this sannyas? Because it's Mayavad sannyas. It was all that was available. So he took from a Mayavadi. And how will you maintain it? So, and then he learned that he was initiated by Keshava Bharati, which is not that high a section of sannyasis, it's a whole hierarchy. So I could train you up a little more, you'll get, So would you like to hear Vedanta from me? Okay. So they sat, it shows him Lord Chaitanya sitting, listening to him expound Vedanta for 7 days. Now I think they were taking rest. I mean, it's 7 days straight. I don't know. But anyway, 7 days. So finally, he wasn't asking any questions, wasn't commenting. So finally, Sarvabhauma, he says, are you understanding what I'm saying? Because you're not asking any questions. So he said, I understand the sutras very well, but your explanation is like a cloud. They're like the sun. You're like blocking the cloud. Says, oh really? Well, maybe you can explain them. So then Lord Chaitanya started to explain the Vedanta Sutra. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya says, he's explaining it in terms of bhakti. Bhakti Vedanta. That's what it's supposed to be. And so finally, at the end of that, he revealed to him, I think, Shadbhuja, right? And Sarvabhauma became his devotee. He became, and he was, top of the line. He was one of the very intimate devotees. Very important. He was the leading scholar in Puri at that time. And so he became an intimate devotee. And when later on he wrote several verses, and the most famous of which is two, that he sent to Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya was staying in the Gambhira. Have you ever seen that Gambhira? Yeah. And it's this little room, you know, and it's still there, nicely preserved in Puri. And he would go to the temple every day, you know, that's where he was staying for a while. So he wrote two verses and sent them to Lord Chaitanya. When Govinda, Lord Chaitanya's servant, saw them, he immediately wrote them on the outside because they both glorified Lord Chaitanya as Krishna. And he didn't like that. You know, he was saying, no. You know, when he heard him being glorified. And so he saw them, immediately ripped them up. But they were preserved, and they were preserved in the CC. So the most well-known one, the first one, is this Vairagya Vidya Nija bhakti-yoga shikshatameka purushak purana. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Sharira Dhari Kripambudiyas Tamaham Prapadye. Very famous verse, probably quoted quite a lot. So what does it say? It says this very same ancient person, Krishna, has now appeared as Lord Chaitanya to teach devotional service to himself, characterized by Vairagya Vidya, Nija Bhakti Yoga. Nija Bhakti means Bhakti Yoga to himself, characterized by detachment and knowledge. Shikshatam, for the purpose of teaching. Shikshatam eka Purushak Purana, this ancient person. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Sharira Dhari. He has taken on the form of Sri Krishna Chaitanya. Same person, Krishna. He's recognizing it. Kripambudhi. He's an ocean of mercy, and I surrender unto him. Very nice verse to memorize. But that Prabhupada often quoted for those first two words. Vairagya Vidya. You'll find right at the beginning of Bhagavatam, 2nd chapter, where the Sutta Goswami is answering the question of the sages. You know, what is the question? What is that supreme dharma by which the soul can become completely satisfied? There are all kinds of dharmas, you know, varnashram dharma and swadharma and this dharma and that. There's also cheating dharmas, kaitava dharma, that look like dharmas but really cheat the practitioner because they keep one bound to this world. So this is the dharma that can bring complete satisfaction to the soul. So the first couple of verses I can do because it culminates in the pertinent verse. It says, Savai pangsang paro dharma yato bhaktir adhokshaje ahaitukya patayata yeyatma suprasiditi. That supreme dharma is that which evokes, which produces, generates devotional service to Krishna. Bhaktir adhokshaje. And he uses a very important word, name for Krishna. It's not a Vrindavan name. It's not even a Vaikuntha name. What it is, adhokshaja, composed of 3 words, Ada, Aksha, and Ja. Aksha Ja means born of the eyes, or all the senses. That knowledge which is born of our investigation. This is the famous ascending process, science. You know, we use our senses to observe, make notes, observe, you know, and then we come to conclusions. Oh, it's like this. You think. But he is Ada Aksha Ja. He pushes all that knowledge down. Ada means down. In other words, he's transcendental. The transcendental Lord, transcendent Lord, beyond the range of the mind and senses. You can learn this little word. Avan Manasa Gochara. Gochara means accessible. Van means words. Manasa means mind. So ascending process is made with the senses and the mind, and you can speak about it. That's material knowledge. But he is Avan Manasa Gochara. He's beyond the range of the mind and the senses, transcendental. So this transcendent Lord, that means you have to have faith. You have to come in touch with the realized soul, the guru, who can impart that faith in you because you can't see it on your own. That's what the temple is all about. Krishna becomes seeable. He agrees to manifest himself through material elements, but it's still Krishna. So we can see him and serve him, you know, and glorify him together. That's why the temple is so important. So, but then he gives some, so what's the characteristics of this dharma, of this bhakti, that the dharma is resulting in? Ahetuki and apratiyata. Very concise. No, ahetu means cause, or it can mean motivation. Ahetuki means no material motivation, and unbroken. Well, all these cheating religions have a big motivation. Mostly, artha jigyasu. Yeah. In other words, I'm in trouble. That's a big motivation. It's fear. and wealth, something material. Please give me wealth. That's another kind of trouble. And I can't pay my rent. Please, like that. So, but it's not. But this bhakti is not involved in that. Ahoitaki, no material motivation. Then there has to be a motivation, a spiritual motivation to please the Lord, and to please His representatives. That's the motivation, and unbroken. It's not a once a week thing or once a day thing. It's 24 hours ultimately. Yeyadma suprasiditi. Such dharma can completely satisfy the soul, because it brings it. And then the very next verse, he talks about that. Vasudeve Bhagavati bhakti-yoga prayojate janayat yashu vairagyam jnanam chayadahoitukam. By engaging in this bhakti, even on the sadhana platform, neophyte platform, quickly, Vasudeve Bhagavati bhakti-yoga prayojate janayat ashu. Ashu means quickly. Generates detachment and knowledge automatically. You don't have to try for it separately, and if you try for it separately, you can never really achieve it in full. The only way to achieve full vairagya is through the knowledge and the spiritual strength generated from this process of bhakti yoga, of sadhana bhakti yoga. So that's how to really become fixed in detachment and sinlessness. Because the vairagya and sinlessness go together. If you're not attached, if you're not attracted to the sense gratification, various sense gratifications, then you're not going to commit sin, right? But that only comes when you're cultivating this process and you're getting knowledge and you're getting taste. They go together. So now all of that is present within the chanting of the holy name. The chanting of the holy name is so complete that if someone somehow or other becomes attracted to that chanting, then everything follows from that. The knowledge. Don't forget vidyavadu jivanam, that the chanting is the life and soul of transcendental knowledge. Because Krishna's within your heart, dadami buddhi yogam tam. I give them the intelligence by which they can come to me, for those who are sincerely worshiping me with love and devotion. So to come to that point is, it all is developed through chanting of the holy name. Haridas Thakur was the perfect example. That's all he did. But it was a total complete process. Purna Kshuddha Nitya Mukta in that verse. It is complete, the chanting, the holy name. Nama Chintamani Krishna's Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha. That the holy name is like a Chintamani gem. Why compare it to Chintamani gem? Because if you touch your consciousness to it, your consciousness is transformed. The Chintamani is a sparsha money, right? When you touch it, it turns to gold. So you touch your consciousness to the holy name through hearing and chanting sincerely, and your heart becomes transformed, purified and transformed from, we can see, the greatest sinner to the great devotee, go back to Godhead. So that's the whole essence of the process is described here by glorifying the holy name. And indeed, we'll come to one of the highlights of the chapter is where Yamaraj is instructing his dutas in the glories of the holy name. And then he comes to the point, Etavan evalokesmin pungsang dharma paraksparha bhakti yoga bhagavati tannama guhanadibi. So this is like one of these key verses in the Bhagavad. Etavam. When you see a verse in Bhagavatam that begins with this word, it's usually like a summary verse. It's worth memorizing. So this one he says, Etavan evalokesmin pungsang dharma paraksparha. So it is understood that the supreme dharma for human beings, evalokesmin in this word, is bhakti yoga bhagavati. Well, that's no mystery. Tannama guhanadibi, beginning with the chanting of the holy name. And that's exactly what forms, Lord Chaitanya's process. Don't, for the masses, and we're the masses, he didn't start out with all the philosophy. He did that with Sarvabhauma, Prakashananda, that's what they were able to understand. But for the masses, it's all chanting. Chant, chant, chant. And then when you get tired, take prasad. That was the main process. And it's still the most effective means. Chanting has to be there. Get people somehow to chant, And then everyone will accept prasad, especially if it's prepared with love and devotion and skill and offered nicely. So that was Prabhupada's means. And so the chanting and the dancing and listening to the lecture More chanting, then a prasad. That was what Prabhupada did at 26th Avenue. And that's basically the format for the Sunday feast, kirtan, and then, lecture. More kirtan, right? And then nice feast. But the cultivation of knowledge goes together with vairagya. I like to give the example. It's a little poignant now because Madhusudan has departed. But each appearance day, Prabhupada, a lot of Prabhupada disciples who were in the area, they would come and they would cook. Like you see this, devotees in there, Padman is cooking and like that. And Yamunapati is also in there. But Madhusudan would be in there, and he had this skill of making an exquisite sweet rice. Was it strawberry sweet rice, I think? A lot of times, something like that. Different things, but he was very skilled at that, and he would cool it, make it early and cool it, And so that was one of the highlights of the feast. And so I would use this analogy, which never happened, by the way, but I tell this story, is that there's this anticipation. Okay, that we're almost done with the feast now, so the sweet rice is going to come out, and so the devotees are ready. They've got the 3 or 4 buckets, and about to serve it out. But then if Madhusudan had run out of the kitchen and said, "Oh, Babus, I'm sorry, I put salt in the sweet rice this time." For that knowledge, your taste for that sweet rice would go, right? Said, "Oh, now we don't want the sweet rice." You haven't actually tasted it, but you're getting the vairagya because of the knowledge of what it's like. So apply it to what we did. Okay, you wanna eat meat? Here's the knowledge. 26th chapter of the 5th canto. Here's what happens. Now I know. Oh my God! For every hair on the body of that cow, I have to suffer in hell for 1,000 years. That's millions and millions of years. No, thank you. I think I'll have not meat. This is where they go. And now they have meat that's really not meat. Well, that's better. That's a step up. Or rather, all right, let me go. My friend has been asking me to go to this feast for a while at the Hare Krishnas. Let me try that instead. That's a fortunate soul. But that's the whole idea. Even in the Catholic, church. Look, here's you hear the gnashing of teeth and the screaming in hell. It's just horrible. They're so hot, and you're trying to, don't commit the sin. Okay. But it's out of fear. There's no element of the higher taste. And so it's easy enough for the mind to say, these are just stories. I don't believe it, right? And then I'm just going to go for it. And that's the modern age. There's so many temptations everywhere that the religion, the Bible, everything, you just, forget it, And I'm telling you, all of the scandals in the church is a big deal. There's been a bunch of them recently that came out, and all this stuff. Just so many people are, turned off by that. So like even these priests, they give these lectures, but then they're molesting some boy, horrible. So if you strictly practice devotional service and you follow, then it will act. Even on the most sinful person, this Ajamila, Jagai Madai, right? There are so many examples. The prostitute who tried to seduce Haridas Thakur, she became a pure devotee by his influence, by chanting. So this is the overall lesson of these chapters, and there's some wonderful descriptions of the holy name and the philosophy behind it by Yamaraj. We're going to get in a couple of chapters. All right, I've taken a long time. Any questions, comments? Dr. Saul.
Thank you for the next class. What does the staff signify with the sannyasi?
The staff.
Yeah, just
Danda.
I had another question too.
Okay.
Yeah,
So the Mayavadis have an Ekadanda, which is what does it symbolize? The mind. But for the bhaktas, for the Vaishnavas, they have the Tridandis, and sometimes they even put that in the name, Tridandi sannyasi. So I think in mind, body, and words, or right, mind, body, and words directed. And you'll find you don't see this so much anymore. But they would first hit the danda down, when they greeting the deity, say, and then offer obeisance, then the danda. So it's kind of symbolic, mind, body, and words, dedicating to you, and then offer the danda. So that's what it symbolizes. But at a certain point, like Prabhupada, they have some pictures with Prabhupada of the danda, But he wouldn't carry it everywhere. It's just a trip on airplanes. They came up with a retractable danda at one point, because it was more practical to carry. So after some time, they give it up, But that's what the danda is all about.
Yeah, there
sorry?
was telescopic danda. Yeah, I saw that the devotees, they made like 3. It's made out of bamboo.
Yeah.
But it's made so they screw in,
Oh, yeah, they
screw
can do
into
that
each
too.
other.
Yeah.
And anyways, apparently one devotee, sannyasi, was in some kirtan dancing, this and that. And the thing kind of fell.
Oh.
Anyways. Yep. About the chanting of Ajamila's chanting, he chanted Narayan, which he was referring to his son.
Yeah.
But then it said, like Prabhupada mentioned in today, the summary.
In the purport
reading
of the
that,
summary,
that he did remember Narayan.
The Supreme Narayan, yeah.
Now, of course, you could say, okay, pure chanting is, chanting out of, pure affection, love, and like Prabhupada would say, okay, there's the offensive chanting, and then there's the clearing stage, and then there's pure chanting. So it wasn't pure chanting. Now, in terms of it being like clearing stage or offensive, he was referring to his son, but then he remembered Narayan. So we would say this is offensive chanting in the sense that it wasn't
Well, that's
like,
what it said here. He didn't chant completely offenselessly, which was like another contradiction, because we got namabas. The namabas, is that the clearing stage? I think namabas.
Yeah.
The reflection of the pure chanting. So, you get statements like, people somehow or other, ahobatasha patorcho gari and yajjigre bhartate namatubhyam. This is a verse by the famous verse by Devahuti, spoken to his son, Kapila-dev. Very encouraging verse for devotees. If the name is somehow just on the tip of the tongue, it doesn't say how you're chanting, somehow they're chanting, then such persons must have performed all kinds of sacrifices in previous life, studied all the Vedas, visited all the holy places like that. So the idea, is that somehow we have to chant, even if it's offensive, even if it's, whatever it may be, just chant. And hear the holy name, but also hear from the Shastra about what the standard is. Just like this Harinam Chintamani goes through the 10 offenses and, seriously talks about how you can come to the point of pure chanting, offenseless chanting. So and then you hear just one name, you just chant once. Katamapi Sakadata Muktidam Praniname. This is from the verse by Sanatana Goswami. Jayati Jayati Namananda Rupam Murari. It's a wonderful verse. Namananda Rupam, the very form of bliss, O holy name, the form of Ananda, Ananda Rupam Murari, name of Murari. And then the third line, we have that in Marana Marana Meta Mangalam Mangaladam, Sakala Ningma Valli Satpalam Chitsurupan, Sakadapi Padigitam, Shadaya Heliyava, and Bhagavatanandamatam, Tadi 8 Krishna Nama. I put it into a poem. Of sweet things, it's the sweetest, you will taste at any time. Of things that bring good fortune, it's the perfect paradigm. Of all the Vedic writings, it's a transcendental fruit, the very form of spirit, unalloyed and absolute. When uttered even once with faith, or uttered once with none, heliyava, means like insulting somebody, Bhagavatanatadi, it will deliver anyone. How is that? Well, the point, I think, means that alone it delivers you by opening up the door to liberation, Because you can always stop chanting, you can always, commit offenses and go back to your sinful life, and then you're not going back to Godhead from there. But in your next lifetime, you'll chant again. In other words, you'll still get a chance. But why prolong the agony? Why prolong the agony? We should really think like that. Especially today, with the way the whole world is you know, I mean, at any moment. When I was growing up, there was always this, you know, the atom bomb was always, you know, in my mind. Because I remember falling asleep, oh my God, is the atom bomb going to go off, you know, because it... Okay, it didn't happen in 1962, which almost did. That's Cuban Missile Crisis. You can read about it. The whole world was on edge, you know, because of the radiation, everyone had died. So luckily, there was enough sanity that it didn't happen. But what if it happens if you have a madman with the nukes? You know? You know, you've got this guy in Korea, North Korea. He's kind of crazy. You know, now Putin is showing... I mean, it's just, they've got the nukes. They've got, you know, these things are doomsday machines, science. So the idea is, the point I'm making is that we don't know. Nikshvase nahi vishvaso. This is in the Namashtika. No, excuse me, Kevalashtika. Did you ever hear that? Hare Nama Kevalam. There's 8 verses, beautiful verses. Bhaktivinoda Thakur like that. Actually, it turns out there are 8 out of 100. He wrote 100 verses like that. Those were picked out, I think, by Bhaktivinoda. But it says, Nishvasena hi vishvaso kadarodho bhavishyati kirtane madabalyad harinama kevalam. Remember that our final breath may come at any time, especially with this Omicron. Remember that our final breath may come at any time, no matter if we're old and sick, or in our youthful prime. So young and old alike should chant the name incessantly. The holy name of Shri-Hari is surely all that be. We hear again and again. We come to the point of constant chanting. Avismriti, never forgetting Krishna. The best way to remember is through the chanting, you know. So the idea is that there's danger at every step, even without the nuclear bombs. What to speak of it? So we should take that as our, you know, a live version of the 5th canto here. It's already like that. It's threatening to become, and in places in this world, it's worse than these hellish planets. You want to be in Pakistan right now? Half the country practically is underwater. There's no food there, electricity, medicine. You know, it's just horrific. I mean, this is happening as we speak. Or Ukraine, you know. So the idea we should chant seriously on that basis. I want to get out of here. And if we chant seriously and hear and chant and hear and hear, then that'll develop into attraction for Krishna, taste, the steps, love, you know. And then we won't be chanting out of fear. We'll be chanting out of love for Krishna. But that impetus, Krishna says again and again, Janma Mitra Jada Vyadi Dukkha Doshana Darshanam. This is one of the elements of knowledge. Always be aware of old age, disease, death, rebirth. You know, so that what I'm saying is there's a million impetuses, you know, why we should become serious, and this chapter will glorify wonderfully the holy name, which is our central practice. You know, we can take shelter. Anyone online?
Yes, Dravida Prabhu, may I?
All right, real quick. If anyone wants to leave, they can. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Dravida Prabhu, you have with you the chapter 1, the history of the life of Ajamila, no?
I just read the chapter summary. Yeah, that was a review.
Yes, so the last sentence of the first paragraph, can you read it again, please?
The
last sentence of the first paragraph.
Of the summary.
Of the summary, exactly.
Oh yeah, I can read that. Just give me
Please.
a second, I'd like to locate it because there's a lot of text here.
Because I know you like to locate quotes.
Okay, it says, neither of these methods, however, can free one from the tendency to commit sin.
No. The last sentence of the first paragraph.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Now in this 6th canto?
Yes.
Now in the 6th canto, which consists of 19 chapters, he will describe poshana, or protection by the Lord.
Exactly. End quote. So based on this quote, my question is, what is the symptom that shows that a living entity is not being protected by the Lord?
Fear. Constant anxiety.
Okay. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada was asked, he says, So what is your main experience here that you're having? That you would say, I have no fear. Prabhupada would answer that. The Buddha said, Jai, abide, Charanaravinda. That's one of the symptoms of the pure devotees. Even the greatest danger, equipoise. Right in the Bhagavad Gita. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Haribo.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
That was the first time I gave a question that he didn't say it was perfect, breathtaking. Anyway, it's okay.
Don't make me speak, please.
Keep it up, Vijay Krishna.
Of course, Prabhu, I will follow your instructions to the letter. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.